So it is 7:30 in the Central Time Zone, and it's time once again for cinematic conversation. And tonight we have both a really special film, and we have special guests to talk to you about this. You know, it's funny when Raquel suggested this, I thought, I don't know, I'm not, I don't know if I really am up for this. We're in like cynical days. Do we really want to be happy? Do we want something that's uplifting? And and I've now watched it twice, and it's absolutely both times it made me literally feel better. And films often don't do that in a way that it can transform your mood. And I think that there's something really kind of wonderful in the story, and also the way in which Pixar as a studio like started from the beginning at telling good stories, not just making animated cartoons, but really sort of focusing on story. And they've always had stories that sort of resonate at a higher level. So we have an interesting group of people. We have Yaki Smith. Yaki taught with us at UT Arlington until he ditched us to go down to Oxford, where after being there for 10 minutes, he became an associate dean, and now he's practically running the place. Um, Yaki
Not
is
true, not
not,
true.
I exaggerate slightly. Um, Yaki is not only a really inspiring teacher, and he really is an amazingly inspiring teacher, but he's also an incredible filmmaker. His film Wolf is just really amazing. I was just thinking about it yesterday, how great that film is. And then when the pandemic came, Yaki made a series of short dramatic films that I think probably better tell the sort of soul of what people are going through in this moment than anything I've seen. And I've seen a lot of people do work like this. And then he also did this piece, Dear Bro, about what was going on in the summer. And so those two things together are just pretty amazing, and just a really inspiring teacher. So we're happy to have you. Um, we have Don. And Don, I don't really know very much about you except that you work at Real Effects. So you want to tell me a little
Yeah,
bit about yourself?
yeah, absolutely. My name's Don Dixon. Nice to meet everybody. I've been an artist, animator for about 20 years now, working from everything from slot machines to television animation to video games, and then of course feature films. Um, I grew up in a creative household. My father was into robotics, so he did things for Atari, Worlds of Wonder. So I've been surrounded by creativity and giant robots and weird things my entire life. um,
Cool.
and Most recently, during the pandemic, I have wasted not one day of using my abilities in art to bring more focus on Black lives. I created a book called Pain and Process,
Wow.
which is out on lulu.com. And I think I've really taken this time to kind of process what's been going on and use my gifts to reach out and just educate and teach empathy to others.
Somebody asked what the book was called again. Could you maybe
Uh,
put that in
yeah,
the
it's
chat?
pain and process. Really quick, just looks like this. This is the cover.
Oh,
It's kind
wow.
of bright in here, but you can kind
Yeah.
of.
It's got that little
Uh,
Warner Brother thing behind it.
yeah, well, it's a Target actually, but yeah, so kind of one of the same.
So, what are you working on at Real Effects? What's happening
So
there?
we wrapped up on Scoob, which was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So Scoob came out, which was a huge bummer because that was, growing up as a child, Scoob was the cartoon for me. And to work on that film with those iconic characters, you want to watch it in a movie theater and see the reactions of people, and we didn't get that, and in the perspective of the world, that's a very small complaint to have, but it was a bummer to not have that. But so we wrapped up on Scoob. Another team finished up on a movie called Rumble that's coming out, And now we're currently working on a movie for Netflix called Back to the Outback. I believe it's had a couple of rotating names, but I think that's the one that's sticking. So
Right.
we're working on that right now, which is amazing that we're working on a film in our homes, and I get to be with my girlfriend and the dog and experience life, but also work. It's this new balance. They keep calling it the new normal, which I hate that phrase, but it is our new normal. And it's kind of giving me as an artist perspective on a good balance of life versus uh, versus our passion, which I really think is what this movie touched on too in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. So Don, do you think that animation is particularly suited for this moment of being able to? I mean, it's a little easier to be animating on your computer at home than it is to be on a set with 10 actors and
Absolutely,
20,
yeah.
30 or 40 people on crew.
I
And
think both come with challenges for sure. We did hit the ground running, but there are some difficulties. There's a lot of interaction that you don't get that make scenes what they are. Like some of the most iconic animated scenes that you've probably seen in Pixar, Disney movies, and hopefully maybe real effects, were conceived because they were made in a team environment where
yeah,
you're rubbing ideas off of each other, and we're still getting that thanks to the power of Zoom,
yeah.
but it's not the same thing.
There's something missing in the human contact that
Yeah.
a lot of meetings are useless and bad, but when you come up with something you didn't think of going in, and the sort of way in which people come together and suggest something, that doesn't it can happen on Zoom, but not nearly as much. I don't think you read people and read the room
Yeah.
in the same kind of way.
Yeah. On the
um,
flip side of that, just to jump on it, there is some magic that happens when you are working alone in this space that you don't get. There's a zeroing in on just focus that I think sometimes you can get drawn away when you're in that studio environment.
yeah, absolutely. And there's nobody stops you because it's somebody's birthday.
Yeah.
Sometimes being at the office is the worst place to get anything.
Uh-huh.
And we also have our good friends Harry and Linda from the Denton Black Film Festival. Guys, do you want to say something about your upcoming festival and when it is?
Yeah, I think I'll do that. So the festival is coming up in January. It will be January 27th through February 1st. So we figured out about 3 weeks ago that we lost our minds. I think we had COVID on the brain. So normally people scale down. We actually scaled up. So we'll have 136 films, about 100 plus hours of content, um, and 62 hours of film.
Hmm.
So it's going to be really amazing. A lot of free workshops and just a lot of different things. So we're really excited about it, and we're looking forward to people who want to come. They can check us out on our website, and just thanks for having us.
Great, great. So, who wants to start talking about your impressions of the films and one in the film really kind of spoke to you? Don, do you want to maybe start with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the very first thing is I'm looking at a poster of a black character in a film, and he's the main character that you're talking about. And he looks like me, he looks like my uncle, he looks like my cousins, and I got excited about that. And before I even knew what the character was, I do have a few buddies that work over at Pixar, and I saw the poster for Soul, and I wrote my friend. I said, with a title like Soul, I better see some black characters in this movie. And he just told me, he said, "Get ready, man, get ready." And boy, was he right. I was very excited about the movie, and I had fears of it being this film where I was going to see a black character for a brief amount of time, and then he magically was going to turn into someone else. and that Black character was not going to be seen throughout the film. And I was very pleased to see that it was there as much as the soul part of him was represented, because that was important for me. And then I mentioned before just the ideas of showcasing just my people and our heritage. Like they did little things that I really appreciated that made me feel like I was watching my family. There was this little brief moment, and I hope this doesn't count as a spoiler, but like he had just finished the show and his aunties and his mother were about to leave, and they just said this one little line, "We old."
We all.
And that's why they were going home, because it was late. And that little touch, that one little line, like said so much to me watching that film. I really appreciated that. I wanted more scenes that were in New York and in that jazz world. That's, if I had to complain about anything, I just wish that I saw more of that, because it was just beautiful to watch. As an animator, it was flawless. I look at those instruments and they look like I could pick them up and actually use them. The piano look, I mean, it's just the level of detail. And then just the overall message coming out at this time during this pandemic, like we talked about before. Yeah. It's just it's very powerful of a story to talk about not only what happens, how our souls are conceived and what drives it, but also just learning that lesson about what is really important. Because like the passion that we have is driven by the world and the environment that we're in. Like if we're not paying, there's this constant saying amongst animators that you can't animate life unless you live one. And I felt like this movie like just totally sold that message. And I loved it. I really, really loved it.
You know, that last point is something that we as teachers face oftentimes, that people are film geeks and they haven't experienced enough life. So when you look at their scripts, they're just reflections of other films. And I think this film does sort of speak to that. Usually, you know, these sort of inspirational films talk about, you know, finding your passion and, you know, that would change it. But this sort of, you get to that point and it's not what you kind of expected.
Right.
You know, thinking about that sense of the importance of having Black characters in animation, this afternoon, I just Googled, um, uh, you know, problems with Black characters in animation, and I found a little video that I hope you'll, that sort of shows why there is a problem with the way the African Americans have been portrayed in animated films. I don't know if you've seen this, but I think it really is worth seeing. So let me get to share screen here. You know, God, I haven't been teaching for a few weeks and I've forgotten how to do everything. Okay, share screen. Okay, so I want to go to, let me just do it on the desktop. And okay, so are you now seeing this thing that says the story of OJ?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go. This is just.
This is Jay-Z's video for the story of OJ. The first time you see it, the animation is pretty disturbing.
Night nigga, dark nigga, faux nigga, real nigga, rich nigga, poor nigga, house nigga, field nigga.
The video is satirizing racist images that have permeated popular cartoons. The characters look like blackface minstrels, for a reason. Minstrel shows fundamentally shape the history and language of animation.
She rubbed the knuckle, brought him down to the nub, yeah.
From the white gloves, to the huge eyes and mouths, to the violent explosions, our cartoons are chock full of imagery rooted in racist minstrelsy. Live minstrel shows began in early 19th century America.
Don't you forget those old N-men there. Oh, those comical N-men.
White people in blackface makeup pretended to be caricatures of black slaves and freedmen.
How would you like to go to work for me?
Yeah, ma'am. How much you gonna pay me, I hope?
By the 1840s, the minstrel show had become America's most popular art form and lasted into the early 20th century through the early years of animation.
Amen, brother.
Minstrel shows provided animators with stock characters and themes that would have been very familiar to their audiences. Because of this, many early cartoon characters weren't just like minstrels. They were minstrels, with black bodies and faces with big white lips and eyes. And they aped the classic minstrel show, with big opening musical numbers and slapstick send-ups of well-known plays and stories. By the 1930s, live minstrel shows were on their way out, and their expression in cartoons became more self-conscious. Mickey Mouse had to literally black up to perform a minstrel send-up of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Long after the classic minstrel show faded from view, its vestiges remained in animation, even today. Take, for example, the white gloves worn by so many cartoon characters. That was an essential part of the minstrel costume, likely taken from the formal wear of slaves. And now, Nintendo portrays the white glove as a god of the cartoon universe, the ironically named Master Hand. And that recurring cartoon explosion where the faces are charred was a direct reference to blackface makeup. Also, that's a bar of Swanee River playing in the background, a traditional minstrel song. Underlying this explosion gag is another, more profound dynamic with roots in minstrelsy: repetitive, brutal violence with no consequences. The historical American setting for such violence had been plantations, where masters saw no consequences to mercilessly beating and torturing slaves. This violence became a stylized part of minstrel show slapstick, which made its way into vaudeville and animation, and carried forward through 20th century cartoons.
How's it coming, Master Elmer? Tote that barge, lift that bale, yassa, yassa.
Which brings us back to Jay-Z and those cartoon figures in the story of OJ. The song and the animation remind us that no matter how far the depiction of black people has come, history is very much with us.
Still nigga. Still nigga.
Okay, so I think that sort of puts why this film with these characters has deeper resonance. Don, you have anything you want to say about what we just saw?
Oh, I got a huge lump in my throat. Yeah, let me just clear that out. Watching some of that stuff is really tough to this day. And when you think about it, not too long ago, I mean, they didn't show it in that video, but there's some Tom and Jerry cartoons that go back maybe 50, 60 years. That's not a long time, that were just as, or if not more racist in imagery and messaging. And the thing I take away from looking at that and a movie like Soul coming out is subliminally over the years, those messages have been just kind of snuck into the households of everyone. And it sends these stereotype images of Black people. And it's important to see Black characters in roles like Soul, to separate from these awful depictions from the past. The difference with telling a story about a Black character, interestingly enough, is not going to be much different than telling any kind of story. Watching a Black man fall in love is going to be the same. You're dealing with the same empathy, same emotions. There's definitely going to be cultural things that you add to that story that are going to separate it. But at the root, there's stories that everyone should be involved in, and we shouldn't be classified as just butlers and just comic relief. There's so much more. And for me, that's the most exciting part about this movie, is that it's opened the door to a new world of storytelling. And if I had my biggest complaint about the way things are right now, it would be that it's great seeing Black characters run the helm of a film, but I want to see more Black animators, writers, filmmakers who are involved,
Directors.
in the making of that. Because one thing that Pixar did do, and because I watched the extras, and I just spoke with some friends who work there, is they did collectively group people of color together and talked about how this film should be made, and really paid attention to showing a sensitivity and an understanding And I think that was a really good idea because they could have very easily gone in a different direction with this movie, and Black Twitter would have blew up, and everybody would have been up in arms about them making some bad choices. So by them collectively reaching out and getting people involved, people of color involved, I think that was a great idea. Also having a co-director to add who's Black, to add just that voice. It needed that voice, and just bringing on Jamie Foxx as well. Like I couldn't have imagined a better voice to come out of that character than Jamie Foxx. He just he embodied that character, and he played it with respect and a dignity and a passion that just, it made that character come alive. Even the worst of animators would not fail in their shot by having that performance kind of as its foundation.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. Yaki, what are your thoughts about this? And Yaki, as an African American filmmaker and as a parent of a young child, you watch this with your son. Did you watch it differently watching it with him than if you would just watched it by yourself?
Yeah, I mean, y'all said so much already that sort of echoes my feelings. I think for me, and I'm kind of echoing exactly what Don said. It's always refreshing when you see images of Black people in animation, right? We had Hair Love that won the Academy Award last year, or the year before last. I think it was last year, by Matthew Cherry. And then as we go back, right, there's not a lot, right? I mean, of course, you got the Proud Family, you got Bebe's Kids. We can go back to what Bill Cosby did with Fat Albert, right? You have those images, but honestly, when you look at all of the animated films that have been made, or the catalog, there's very few that either feature Black characters that are not stereotypical, that are created by Black folks, right? There's very, very few, right? You have the Spider-Verse, right? You have those films that are happening now, but that is not the norm. And so it's refreshing to see a film that is carried by a Black lead, an animated film. And to Don's point, the cultural specificity, I think, is so great, right? When you see those Black women, when you see even the blues singer, I cannot think of her name at the moment. When you see him with his students, right? There's just a cultural specificity that I think really rings so true. And hearing Don talk about, Pixar bringing together people of color to really sort of chart out the film and sort of make sure that it did have that cultural specificity, you can feel that, and you see that when you see the movie. And so it's great. And to answer your question about my son, as I said earlier, this wasn't made for my kid. I'm gonna just say it, right? It was really made for me, right? When I see this film, and I want to talk about a film that's it's all the way on the other side of the spectrum, but for me, I saw these sort of parallel points, and that's Synecdoche, New York, right? Here's an artist, played by the great Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is trying to figure his life out, right? He's trying to figure out who he is. He's having this existential crisis of, am I good, right? His life's falling apart. He's losing his wife. He's losing his daughter. He's trying to put on this massive show, and he keeps failing. And he literally, at the end of the film, lays down, and God says, now you can die. And he closes his eyes and he dies, right? But this is after 2 hours of me watching this man try to put the pieces together. And when I look at Jamie Foxx's character, and so that's what I'm seeing, honestly. I'm seeing a man who is at this point where it's not like he obviously doesn't want to die, but he is in a place where he's feeling like, man, is this going to happen for me? He hadn't given up the dream or anything, but he is like, wow, am I ever going to have my day? And I think by the end of the film, he realizes that not only will he have his day, but he has had his day. His days have been every day that he's teaching a student, every day that he's inspiring another musician, every day he's just at the piano playing, doing the work. That is the day, right? And all of those days lead up to the quote unquote big day. And so again, that's not anything that my son can even understand at this point. But for me, as I'm watching it, I'm feeling so many different emotions as an artist sort of living, during COVID, trying to figure out how does one stay creative during this time. Again, I can't say I'm middle-aged yet, but I'm getting up there, right? Just turned 40. I don't know if that's middle age, it might be. unless I live to be like 95. I'm gonna be like Miss Jane Pittman. I'm gonna be 110. But you know, but it's like as you get up in age, you do start asking yourself those questions, right? Okay, what will happen to my art, right? Will it live on after me? Will I ever get, quote unquote, have my day, whatever that day is? But again, as I said about the film earlier, I think you start to realize as you get older that you have had your days, and they are happening every day. It's happening every single day that you get up and you keep creating, you keep writing, and you keep going forward, and you keep putting your work out there for the people that need to see your work. Those are your days. That is your public. Those are the people that need to see your work. And I think as I watched that film, that's really what I took away from it.
You know, Yaki, when you're talking about that, it sort of reminds me of the script. Normally in a script, you have a character and they have this goal, and he has this goal of performing. And that's not the goal at the end of the film. It's like not what you do, not what you teach in screenwriting. It's like you get the goal and then, oh no, that's not what I really wanted. And it's like has this coda that I think is really kind of fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this a great film. And I think that's what makes Pixar really good at what they do, right? They always, in some ways, defy our expectations, right? We think we're coming in to see one thing and we leave with so many others. You know, I was talking about Coco with you all earlier. It's like that's a film that me and my kids sit down and watch together all the time. Because yeah, it's for kids and it's animated, and I think there's something about that film that really attracts my kid to it. But then there's also something that attracts me to it. Again, this idea of young boy wanted to be an artist and you know, trying to convince his family that being an artist is good enough, and that he himself is good enough, and that he can live outside of the confines that his family have set up for him. It's like those are the things that I think Pixar gives us in all of their work. It's like, yeah, we're gonna make this thing for kids, but really it's not for kids. It's for the kid in all of us. I'll say that.
Yeah. Don, I'm going to ask both you and Yaki, what is it about animation that has been a little slower to get African Americans in the driver's seat? You know,
I've been asking that question for a number of years, and I honestly I don't have an answer. I have a story though. I get approached a lot by young artists and young animators online who have questions about the industry or just want to just ask me how I did something. And one time I had a young man write me, and he was telling me he wanted to become an animator, but his family told him that it was a white man's job. And it was like getting punched in the chest when I read this, because it broke my heart. Like I didn't know how to answer him, and then I thought really hard, and I understood why his family was telling him that, because that's when you watch these DVDs and you go to and if you're passionate about it, you wait till the movie's done and you watch the extras, and that's where you get like all the fun insides the studio stuff. And when you look at those, you're seeing a huge sea of young white men, and then maybe sprinkled in there are some people of color. But I didn't know how to answer his question. I told him that it wasn't a white man's industry, but when I said those words, I felt like I was kind of lying to him, because it kind of is. Like that's the legitimate fact, is when you look out there, that's what you're seeing, and that's changing. But you know, I look around, and you know, I've been at Real Effects, like I said, for 9 years, and we worked on one film where it was the only time we worked on that film where I can say I looked up and there were two other Black animators in our team, with myself included. And to me, that felt like we had an army at that time. So I think if we want to fix this problem, we have to start reaching out to schools and giving talks. They need to see that there are people that look like them doing these jobs, because all it takes is just seeing that. Like, you know, I grew up, like I mentioned earlier, my father had a creative job working at Worlds of Wonder. He made he designed Teddy Ruxpin laser tag. He worked at Tyco, And I grew up around this. Like, he was in California at the boom of technology at that time. It was like when Disney was being approached by Atari to talk to its artists because they were just about to start making games. So it was this amazing time. And my dad was doing robotics for Atari, and they didn't end up doing robotics. They ended up making games. But at that time, I saw this young Black man doing extraordinary things, creative things. And he was my father, so he looked just like me, but the older version. So I had the luxury of seeing where I could go at that young age. And that's all it really takes, is once you can see something, then what it comes down to is then you got to put in the work. But if you see where you can end up, then you know it's possible, and you just keep pushing towards that goal. So I think getting involved on a school level, on a young level, and just giving more opportunity, which, you know, that's the big problem, is trying to have these studios give those opportunities. But I know that you know, there is this rise that's happening, and I have faith that with stories and movies like Soul, it's going to happen. I worked with Jamal Bradley on a animated short called Substance, and it was very similar style-wise, just seeing Black characters like you did in Soul, in like living in the city, and then the whole story was carried by these Black characters. Frank Abney as well just came out with Canvas, which is on Netflix. You guys should check it out. It's an 8-minute short, beautifully done, and it just focuses on Black characters and made by a young Black man who directed it. So I think that the more that this starts to happen, and we shine a light on it, it's gonna kind of blossom and hopefully reach out to the masses, so that I never have to hear another young man say that this is a white man's industry, because I don't want to hear that again.
So Don, I have to challenge you on this, because I think you're right, but what you need to do is to go out and teach, because I can tell you, I've been in a room when Yaki and I were talking to high school students, shows them their film, and they look at Yaki and they say, "You can do this, I can do this." And I've seen that on their faces, right, Yaki?
Oh, you know, you're absolutely right. And, you know, just really to echo what Don is saying, I think it's so important that we're out there, right? I mean, students and people really they can't envision what they can become unless they actually see it happening in front of them, right? I mean, I even think of myself, you know, being a filmmaker, I come from San Antonio, the east side, kind of the hood or whatever, and nobody was making movies, right? What does that really look like? They thought it was a pipe dream. Now, I kept with it, and I wanted to do it, so I kept doing it. And so I had to find sort of my role models myself, right? And they had to become the people that I was watching in cinema, the Spike Lees and the John Singletons and the Charles Burnett's, right? Those were the people whose films, the Hughes brothers, right? That made me say, yeah, you can actually do this. Black people actually can make movies, and they can be successful, and you can make movies about you, right? That's the thing. I think oftentimes we think that we can't make movies about our own unique experiences, but our experiences, there's audiences out there for those who want to see those experiences and who want to live in those worlds. And so, yeah, I mean, but I had to honestly, I had to create my own sort of mini film school where I could sort of be inspired and be surrounded by those who were doing it, because nobody that I knew, there was no one that I could reach out and touch who was actually making films. And that did make it, you know, incredibly difficult, one, to stick with it, but also incredibly difficult to convince others sometimes. Because again, back to the it's a white man's world, a lot of times they're like, no, they can do that, but not you. Those people that come from this pedigree, they can make movies, they can be directors, but not necessarily you. You know, luckily I had a mother and a support system who was like, no, you can do whatever you want to. But there were a lot of naysayers, but that has everything to do with the fact that there was no one around us who was doing this thing. And so I do think it's incredibly important that we get out there and we show young folks that no, you can do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, how much money you have, none of it. If you want to do it, you work hard and you can attain it. Then doesn't mean there won't be barriers. I think we also can't sell them a pipe dream. I tell my students, my Black students all the time, this is incredibly difficult when you are Black. It is real, because you walk into rooms with white executives and they try to tell you the kinds of films you should be making. They tell you that, you know, Black folks don't talk like that. They don't do this, when they have absolutely no clue, by the way. But they're telling you all these things about your own experience. And so you have skin, and you have to walk out of one meeting and say, it's cool, you didn't like it, but somebody will. And even if nobody likes it, I like it. So I'm going to find a way to get the thing made. And that's just been my career trajectory, is that I found ways to get my stuff made when other people have slammed the door on me because they didn't necessarily believe in the kinds of work that I wanted to make. And so another part of it is just perseverance. You got to keep with it. You got to do it. You got to believe in yourself, and you got to make it happen by any means necessary. Because if you do that, again, at some point, people will take notice, and the work that you've been making in these sort of small circles will get magnified.
So, Yaki, do they have, or do you have many animators of color at UT? I mean, we have a lot of Hispanic and Latino people in our animation program, but I don't know that we have a lot of African Americans in our program. What's it like at UT?
I honestly, I don't, and I don't want to lie here, but I can't think of one Black animator that I've come across at UT. Yeah, I'm not. It's sad, but I'm not.
You know, so indeed, and it's always hard to find people who teach animation because they can make a lot of money in the business, and getting them to teach. So Don,
Can they?
so
Tell me more about the ones that make a lot of money.
well, I've heard a rumor. I don't know. It could be, but yes, and so I know that there could be opportunities, Don, for you to really inspire people, and I think it really does. It's really important to see somebody who's modeling the kind of things that you want to do and give them hope, and you know, and also building community. I mean, Yaki, from the beginning, you had people you worked with over and over again. I think that's really kind of important. And you have to have like people that can sort of get what you're doing and sort of give you a kind of a feedback look. Don, do you want to talk about the look, the animated look, and how they sort of came up with that, and you know what it meant for you as an animator? What did they do differently than maybe what they might do in other Pixar films?
I think, well, for one, real quick, that suit, I got to talk about that suit. It was amazing. The cloth sim and the cut. I had to pause and just kind of take a moment to appreciate the level of detail that that suit came out to be. But on top of that, the
hair too, the hair.
Oh, just all of it. I think the thing that stood out for me the most was the way that they sold the moments through lighting. And what I mean is, when he went into that jazz club, I was like, shit, I'm in this jazz club. Like the colors, like, I don't know if there's a lot of jazz fans out there, but like the Blue Note jazz albums, like they're so artfully done, and they have these bold colors against like strong lines, and they made it feel like that in those scenes when he's in the room, and you've got these really strong reds and this harsh rim light, and then like you get these really like deep blues, and that they would have kind of shining on Joe as almost like a mirror of what his soul was, that kind of blue tone. I just really appreciated how through lighting they told the story through that. The barbershop scenes, they were much more. You could, by comparison, you look at the jazz moments in the jazz club, and it felt very there. It still felt warm, but it felt like this old, like New York, like you were in this club. But then you go to the barbershop, and I had the same like feeling of. I always describe it things as like when you're getting a hug. When I got my first job and I drove to Chicago from Michigan, kissed my mother goodbye, and I was starting my life. And when I drove up and I saw the city, I felt Chicago hug me. Like I still describe it that way because
I know that feeling.
It's amazing. It's those moments in your life that if you're really paying attention, you feel it. So in the barbershop, I felt that hug. I felt it was like family, and it was lit brightly so you could see every character kind of, but they were in such a enclosed space. But I still felt the connectivity amongst them all. So yeah, through lighting, and then you go into the I don't know what they call it, the afterworld or the kind of waiting room world. I don't remember what they referred to it as, but even that separated itself as a moment. So yeah, through color and light, I think they really excelled more than they have in any Pixar movie that I've seen. I mean, I felt like I was in New York City on those scenes, and that's like the best way to engage a viewer, especially with animation, is if you can create the world and just show them a still of that world and they already fill in there. Then once you animate on top and have the voices, all that is like cherries on top. If you can pull them in with just the environment that you created, then I already knew I was watching an A+ movie when I saw the first couple scenes of the city. So yeah.
By the way, speaking of the first couple scenes, I completely forgot about this. The film opens with the Disney look, but you hear like bad music underneath that. And it's like, how gutsy is that for a studio to open a movie with middle school bad band music underneath
Absolutely.
that, with your logo, with your logo that you've had forever, and you protect and you sue people if they steal. I mean, it's like a very bold move for the Disney. The other sort of scene in terms of a visualization I thought was really interesting was the in the zone thing with the kind of blue stuff around it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like any artist knows that there's a moment when you're kind of in the zone, and I really have not seen that portrayed in film in a kind of nice way like that. I thought that was just like it was just a nice thing. I mean, anybody who's played music or like you're painting or doing something, what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a really nice, beautiful visualization of that.
Absolutely.
So, Pauline, do you have any comments about this? Anything you want to say?
Well, I love the movie. I'm love the fact that there was representation. I want to see diverse representation at everything every screen I look at. It just makes me feel like we're thinking and we're including. And I thought the film was beautifully done. It dealt with some really complex issues.
Yeah.
And I was amazed they sidestepped, like religion didn't even filter into the storyline, and I didn't even think about it. I loved the beauty of the animation. I identified with Joe as an artist and a teacher, and felt that I knew him. And I think that although I will say this, I read some criticism, and I think this is an interesting point about the fact that this is the third Black animated lead where there was transformation. Did any of you read that criticism?
Yeah, I was mentioning it before. I've heard it before, just with Princess and the Frog, Spies in the Skies. What was the other one? There's quite a few. That was my biggest fear going in on this movie was, all right, we got this Black character. Yes, finally. Oh, wait, who's this little blue dude? Oh, that's him? Okay, so now they're going to take the one time we get this Black character, they're going to turn it to a blue guy. And I was worried that was going to take up the film for me. And luckily, the way that they did their storytelling, I didn't walk away the same way I did on some of those past transformation movies, because I get the criticism for that, and I'm like right there with them on that. But for this, I felt like I saw enough of Joe, like Joe, Black Joe, throughout the film. I felt that they didn't try and hide away from it. And yeah, if I did have any criticism, I wish that there were more of those New York scenes and seeing him interact with his mother, and kind of more on that story. But
I was looking for Joe too. I wanted to go back to the cityscape and learn more about him.
mm-hmm,
But I also felt like the transition, the fact that there was this physical transformation story in there that bothers me, that we keep repeating that. I wish we wouldn't do that, but I felt like this was a really thought out scenario with the soul and the tie-in to the subject matter, to the music, to the character, to the storyline. It all just seemed thoughtful and authentic and kind of seamless. It needed to be there. I don't know about the cat. I don't know about the lady's voice in Joe's body. I don't know about that, but I'm glad that I felt like I knew Joe by the end of that movie. I felt really confident in him, and I liked him, and identified with him, and was really glad to see the movie as a whole making sense. So
Yeah. So, Don and Yaki, do you think the film would have been substantially different if it was directed by an African American instead of somebody who's a co-director? But if it was really that was their film, do you think that would have been substantially or slightly, or how might it have been slightly different?
it would have been different if I directed it.
Okay,
I can say that. I can't speak on like anyone else, but like I know if I did it, something stood out to me on the extras, which was they mentioned that they wanted to try and have Joe in his real life be as far away from being a jazz musician as possible. And I was just thinking to myself, well, like making him a music teacher, that's not as far as you can go. Like if you really want to make this seem like his dream was not realized, then he shouldn't be anywhere near what he wants, because that to me adds so much more tragedy to the fact that he's not realizing his dream and his passion. So by making him a jazz teacher, I felt that was too safe. I think that it would have also been a huge statement on just our world in general, and especially in the United States, about a Black man with a dream and going after that. Again, for a Pixar movie, touching on that might have been too much of a bummer and way too much of a downer. But I think taking him further away would be like the first thing I would have thought of doing if I were directing the film. But I also appreciate that they did make him a teacher, because it paralleled when he was a soul and he's teaching the other soul. Like he was a mentor to the other soul. So from a storytelling point of view, I get why they had to kind of put him in the middle and not go to that extreme. But I like to go to extremes with things that I'm working on. So that would be one thing I would have changed.
You know, one of the things, Pauline, that you were sort of talking about that I just want to amplify slightly is that that this film is spiritual without being religious, and I think that's a really good and difficult place to sort of get to, and it's not like simply spiritual, like just Aum will be spiritual, but it really sort of speaks to something about who we are and how we get to the sort of better parts of ourselves, in a not simplistic way, in a relatively complex way. That, and again, as Yaki was saying, not necessarily meant for kids, but something that, that we can all watch and really feel good about. And I think it's also the kind of film that you remember, and think about a few days later. Kind of stays with you, that there are things, to sort of, come back into your dreams and your thinking, and how you feel about things.
When I think about Peter Docter and his films, it's like he puts the question on the table that he wants to answer with this incredible world that he creates, and he never deviates from that question. And when I think about Monsters Inc., it was always, why am I afraid of the dark closet? And then he created this incredible answer for kids. And then this one seems to be, what's the meaning of life? That's the question he put on the table. And boy, they researched the hell out of that. I saw all kinds of things coming in, even hippies and, every kind of solution to answer that question. And it just seems to tie in seamlessly, this world that he's created. So it's just an interesting way of approaching animation in a movie. And I think there's room for that at Pixar. It doesn't always have to be super fun and be for kids and for adults. I do agree. As a designer, I want to know who the audience is. And I do not think this audience is for anybody under 12. I don't think you can go there, as Jacques said.
And oftentimes animated films are specifically targeted towards, young people. And I think that, just looking back at Pixar from the very beginning, and the Luxo lamp, I mean, they're about, they're funny, but there's emotion in that is not like a Wile E. Coyote. There's something different about the sort of soul of Pixar, that has a film that speaks to sort of larger issues. And I think, it's great that they get to have the budget to spend a lot of time and do the research and to pull off all the details and do them really well.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we're lucky that we get a chance to see these sort of things.
Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting because I think, when you start talking about the film is spiritual without being religious, I think anytime I watch a Pixar film, for me, there is a spiritual component in it. And what I mean by that is they're always asking these existential questions, right?
mhm.
Why am I afraid of the dark is actually an existential question, because what is the dark, right? What's in the darkness that you're afraid to conquer, that you're afraid to face, that you're afraid to actually go forward with, right? And I think it's the same thing with this film. It's really, it's asking it, I think, on a much more sort of overt level, right? Where we can really see it. But I think all of their films do that. I mean, I even think about when you think about the moment of in the zone, which you talked about earlier. I mean, I think for me as an artist, that zone is a spiritual place. It's the place where artist Yaki is actually talking to his creations, right? Where the characters speak to him, where the storyboards and the framings and the compositions and the lighting and the design and even the hair and all, it all comes to me in this place where I have sort of left my body and my spirit is now connecting with the spirit of the characters that I am creating, or the worlds that I'm creating. The way they did that in the film, right? I love that when he's playing the piano and he goes into the zone and he literally leaves his body, and he's starting to connect with his spirit man, as we would call it. I mean, I think for me, all Pixar films, they do that in some way. Again, not as overt as this one, but I think that's what they're asking in all of their films. And I think that's why their films resonate, and they actually usually, again, even if it's the kids film, I kept talking about Coco, which, yeah, it's a kid, more kid friendly than this one, but I think adults can get something out of that film as well, because it's also asking you those hard questions.
Yeah, and very hard questions. I mean, in both cases. We're coming up near the end here. Don, do you have any sort of closing thoughts that you want to leave with people?
I've said pretty much everything I want to say about this film, but as far as one statement, I will say this is by far the deepest Pixar movie that has ever been made, and I think that I agree that it wasn't made for young kids, but what I like about some animated movies is they're made for kids to grow into, because they watch these films over and over and over again. And I remember growing up as a kid where I would watch a film as a young child and I would get something out of it, but then I'd watch it again as like a preteen and I would be like, oh wow, they were saying that. And so like, and because of the nostalgia of when I watched it at a younger age, when I got it at an older age, it was already in my DNA. The movie was already in me. So the lessons, it was like watching it for the first time again. So I feel like that's what this kind of movie is. And I'm excited for there to be more films that do that, because I do think that a great film is, especially geared towards kids of all ages, should be one that we can grow into. Because I know I'm going to watch this thing in a week and I'm going to get something else out of it. So if I'm going to leave on any kind of final thought, that would be it.
Yaki, you have anything you wanna wrap up with?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the question you asked earlier. And again, this is not a definitive answer to that because I don't know. But you asked if a black animator had actually been at the helm, would it have been different? And I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes, because something that we keep echoing here, and I think everybody said it, is I wanted more time in New York, in the world, with our main character. And I think that if a black animator was at the helm of this, we probably would have gotten more of that, because there would have been, again, more moments of, I keep talking about that cultural specificity that I think a black animator would have been able to bring to this, because you're bringing your life to this, right? You're bringing your own experience. You're bringing your own history and backstory and the way in which you communicate with your family. And I think that if you had someone at the helm who had lived those experiences, they would have probably delved into those much more. And not saying we would not have gone to the other world and into heaven wherever we were, but I do think that we probably would have had more time on earth, in New York, in that barbershop, eating with his mama and his aunts, right? Really exploring that world that I really, really wanted to see, and the world that I thought, honestly, when I watched the film, I thought I was going to spend most of my time there. But even just beyond that, I think it's such a great film because, again, to kind of piggyback on what Donna said, I hadn't even thought about that. I agree. I think it is a film for kids to grow into, but I also think it's a film that speaks to the kid in all of us, right? Because it is somewhere, when you get in your 20s or so, where you begin to lose, right, that sense of wonder, where you begin to lose that sense that you can conquer anything, that sense that if you want it and if you work hard for it, that you can have it. Sometimes we lose that because we become jaded by life and people have talked us out of it, right? And I think a film like this makes you go back into that kid and makes you say again, you know what, wait a minute, if I can get back to that 12 or 15-year-old who really wanted that thing, and if I can really tap into him or her again, then maybe, just maybe, even at age 40, 50, or 60, maybe I can actually get the thing that I always wanted, because I don't have the distraction and the noise of life and other people who also have been jaded by life, who then turn around and jade you. I don't have those voices in my head. And so I think this film is speaking to that, is trying to get us back to that moment and make us again see that thing that's been living inside of us forever that we need to get back to.
And particularly during this time where we're mostly spending time inside, depressed by everything, to have fires us. Do you think that this film, just being there, will encourage more young black animators to pursue this and try to get something on a larger stage? And will this have a cultural impact in that way?
I'm gonna say yes and yes and yes to all of that. I mean, it kind of goes back to what we said earlier. I think the fact that you see a character like that on screen, and and again, again, we can't just talk about this film by itself, right? It's a continuum, right? We have to think about A Hair Love, and we have to think about a Spider-Verse, and we have to think about the other animated films that have been coming with black characters for the last 5 or so years, and even Princess and the Frog. We can even go back to that, right? But my point is that I think that seeing this and then looking at the others, I think black animators will say, yeah, I can do this because there's a place for me, there's a home for me, my stories matter, right? They're looking again for someone who has a unique perspective on this particular subject matter, and I have that, and I'm talented as an animator, right? And so yeah, I think we're going to see more people really go out and want to sort of become animators. But I also think that we're going to see more films like this. You know, Hollywood is all about money. We know this. And I know this is on Disney Plus, but that really translates into people that view the film, right? So how many views is this going to get? And if it gets a certain amount of views, you'll see Soul 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? So we got to make sure that that happens.
Yeah, and then that Soul 2 is done by a Black director.
There we go.
An assistant.
John can do Soul 2. There we go.
I'm ready.
Hey, get down to work with you, will you? So, guys, thank you so much. It has been so wonderful to have all of you. It's just a really great and lively discussion. Don, it's wonderful to meet you. And, you know, Don and Yaki, could you like meet each other? Because Yaki, you will need an animated sequence at some point. And I know
you're right.
I'm looking for a talented person to work with.
I'll make sure we connect after this for sure.
All right,
Let's
guys.
do it.
Thank you so much. It is just wonderful when we start. I never know where we're going, but this was just such a great discussion. Thank you all so much. We appreciate you. Raquel, thank you for setting this all up. It was really wonderful.